Now, Cam, what is maybe the story you did or I don't know, story you reported on, or maybe even a story you broke in the NFL space that in your head, it was kind of like your I made it moment. Do you have a piece like that? And if so, what was it?
Yeah, I don't know if it was my I made it moment. I probably had one of those earlier, but the one I always remember is this past year covering Damar Hamlin, and him nearly dying on the field and being, revived, essentially 3 days later coming back to life. And I was on the ground for that story, and it really was a lesson to me in this job of it's never mundane, right? I was covering this game that was Bills Bengals, and it was supposed to be. I was hyping this up as potential game of the year. We got Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. These guys have never played each other, but they have a relationship, and they're two of the top three quarterbacks in the AFC. And the game became very secondary very quickly. It was looked like a very innocuous hit, but it ended up leaving the guy, dead on the field, and it was scary. It was something where like I was very much challenged between my personal emotion and also being able to say, I've got to tell this story. How can I do this in a way where I do not have myself in the story, my emotion in the story, but I can still give people the raw updates they need? Because if you remember, there was a lot of silence from everyone involved the first 24, 48, even 72 hours. And so I was really the only reporter, I mean, the only voice in my outlet. And ESPN had a reporter as well, Coley Harvey, who did a great job. And there was a couple local outlets as well. But we were essentially the only voices updating America with what's going on with Damar Hamlin until eventually the Bills came out and started to release statements of their own. And the hospital kind of put some things out as well, 3 or 4 days in. But that story will forever be with me. Waking up 6 a.m. for Good Morning Football every day, being out there to probably about 8 9 p.m. And just not really knowing what's going to happen and trying to prepare yourself for every element of the story, making sure that you do everything right because this is a story that's involving life and death. And so everybody wants answers, but I can only provide you with what I'm able to gather. The context I'm able to get from developing relationships with his family and trust there. The information I'm getting from teammates who trust me to give out their perspective as well. And so that story I think is probably the biggest story I've covered in my career, and it's the one I'll remember the most. I've had others previously that probably got
Mhm.
me more on the national scene, but that's the one when you say what's the story, that's probably the one I'll still point to 5 or 10 years from now.
So being in that, Cam, I mean, obviously it's a really kind of big moment. I bet there was some kind of sense of kind of the gravity of the moment, the gravity of the kind of story you were telling in that moment. But what was it like for you? As you said, you had to balance your personal emotions of kind of what you were seeing with the fact that you knew you had a job to do. What was it like for you being able to compartmentalize that
It's a hard word.
and be able to do your job in such a big moment.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first 20 minutes, I was just in shock. Like I was just like watching everybody else, just watching, trying to get the reactions of other people and see what's going on. And then after that, I tried to tell myself, hey, it's time to go. It's just like any other a player, right? You have to react. I almost felt like a backup quarterback, so to speak. Like it's weird the way my job works. I do a lot of coverage during pregame, and then once the game is going on, I'm just watching as a spectator. And eventually after the game, I'll do a post game interview, sometimes a post game report. But during the game, I'm just like much of you guys, like I'm watching. And so immediately then I had to get thrown into the action, and it really didn't matter how I felt because I'm working as a conduit for the rest of America. And I remember like I don't think it truly hit me the gravity of everything until maybe a week after I got back home. Like I think I just kept going straight off adrenaline. Like it was no like, hey, I remember having brief conversations with my wife, and it was all in the context of, and I'm just gonna be really real with you. What do I say on air if he doesn't make it? What do I say if he's brain dead?
Mm.
These are things that like I've got to prep myself for. So that's the emotional part of it, but it's also the job part of it. Like I have to like if that happens, if we get a notification there, I can't be like, oh man, and start, I've got to go. I've got to go. And so, God willing, there was a big breakthrough that he was able to not only be okay, not only live, not only be fully healthy, but now it looks like he's going to play football again, which is
Yeah.
tremendous to think about. 4 months ago, we were, wondering if he would be able to be the same human. And so, I think for me, emotions didn't really hit until a week later. I just went off adrenaline.